that point in my life, I had no idea what like talking to yourself meant. Like I was just listening, right? And that voice is, yeah, you're not good enough. How are you ever going to make the lineup? And then you start thinking, man, all these people I know at school, they start asking about how golf's going and it's not going well. And so that builds right. And then, you get the expectations of people back home asking, how are things going? And you start to feel like a failure a little bit after a while because that's where my values were, right? It's like if I didn't perform at a certain level, then that mirrored my value, right, as a person. And that was the first mistake is I didn't know what were my real goals, right? Like obviously everyone wants to go and play and win tournaments and that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a lot more to it than that because if that's how you're judging yourself, you're in a really tough spot because not the percentages aren't in your favor the higher you go in any endeavor, right? So, learning to value other things that were important to me outside of performance is a really hard thing to do when you hit an uncomfortable spot and you just feel like performance is everything.
And describe performance, because obviously you had a certain level of skill. It's this comparison, right? This comparing your skill and your ability to something else and getting it heavily attached to outcomes, which creates this pressure, and we get focused on the problems, right? We start talking about the problems, we start thinking about the problems. I remember reading about Alfonso Soriano's career at the end of his career with the Yankees after he'd come back after being with the Cubs. All he kept talking about was his hitting slump and how it was costing his team, and his focus on both of those things, the problem and not knowing he had a different way to view those things and to get focused on a solution, really caused him to end his baseball career in abruptly and not in a way that he had wanted to. And so I hear you talking about that, talking about the problem. It's not going the way I want. It really does create a lot of pressure on ourselves, doesn't it?
Yeah. And every time you tee it up, right, I'm like, that guy hits it further than me. That guy has iron plays better. That guy putts better than me. Like mentally, I knew that they had me beat. Like, and you get in that perfection phase, right? Where as soon as something wasn't perfect as far as performance goes, for lack of a better term, I would just kind of quit. Like I would just throw in the towel, and that's not going to help the situation. But I didn't have the skill set at that point in my life to handle it other than, okay, well, that didn't work. And I got tired of getting beat up after a while. And it's like, I've got to try something different. But for the most part, it's just, yeah, you constantly compare yourself to someone else and they're getting more playing time. And, that school that we're playing's got more resources and a better indoor facility and just anything that you could compare yourself to. I was playing that game and you'll find someone to lose to every time when you play that game.
Yeah, so well said. You will find someone to lose to every time when you play the comparison game. It really is the thief of joy. And side note, the job of everybody else in this world is taken by them. There really is only one Charlie Smith, one Trake Carpenter, and that's why I think encouraging young athletes to start looking at what they are doing well. Not as a way of self promotion, but just as a way of acknowledging that there are certain things they're doing well, and there are certain things that they want to get better at, but not judging either of those things. I'm doing well at certain things and I want to get better at certain things. And it's the behavior that'll drive me there. And you got behind some different behaviors because you made a leap at Ball State, and I think you finished as a captain on that team. And that came from, I mean, what was the shift in you even at that age? What did you learn to ask for help in? And what was the shift in your mindset that got you to change that narrative?
I was always super competitive. Growing up, my uncle was actually my high school golf coach. My dad was my junior high golf coach. They were both basketball coaches. I've always been around a competitive environment, right? And so I finally just got to the point where I'm like, there's got to be a way to figure this out. Like I wasn't just going to quit altogether. And I basically started from scratch and I went and hired a swing coach and I totally revamped my game. And this was kind of going into senior year. I was like, I started to realize that like, this is my last chance. And I just made the commitment to myself that I'm just going to lay it all out there and see what happens. And I just committed to overhauling my game, really going out there and I'm like, just see how good I am. And if I fail, well, I failed for 3 years already. What's another one, right? Like took a little pressure off myself and took away, I guess, a lot of the expectations and said, let's just commit to this thing and see how good I can be. And It worked out. I ended up winning or tying for first in a tournament in the fall my senior year, and that for me was it was I guess rewarding that everything I had done had paid off, but it was also the realization of the values and the things that I did on the way to the mountaintop, not just that event. Like that event itself isn't what's fulfilling. It's what I learned along the way that I know now and that I help teach and coach now. But I had to figure that one out a little bit on my own, which has, been a motivation for kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's funny to hear you say it because I don't think anything could be further from the truth. Those 3 years weren't failures. I mean, the only failure for me is quitting. The only failure for me is packing in the golf clubs and saying, I'm going to go sit, in the dorm and I'm going to drink some beer and I'm going to hang out with my friends. But all of the 3 years that you said you were failing, you were actually failing forward. You were learning about your emotions. You were learning about the things that you weren't doing. You were learning so much in those 3 years, and you kept failing forward to your senior year, which led you to win a golf tournament. I think we don't really understand, the psychology of the word failure, because really, as long as you're in the game and as long as you're looking at improving, there is no failure. There's just learning. And that's what I heard is a whole bunch of learning.
Yeah, it's the fear of failure often will cause you to fail. And I was afraid of failing. And when I took, like you said, failure is okay. Like it's not failure, like you said. When I take that off the table, expectations go away, the comparison goes away. And if I don't shoot the lowest score, that's fine. That doesn't define me. And that's how I ended up playing my best golf. And you get the most enjoyment out of life for the same reason, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm drawn to, I spent a little bit of time working on a talk on resilience and what it actually means to be resilient. One of the athletes that I took a look at was Peyton Manning, and looking at his rookie season, leading the league in interceptions, being a starting quarterback that went 3-13. There was lots of things. I mean, he threw a Super Bowl costing interception in a game against the Saints. I mean, there were lots of things that quote unquote could have been seen as failures, but he used all of those things as lessons, and he didn't view any of them as permanent. He didn't view any of them as pervasive, and he didn't view any of them as personal, meaning this isn't going to define me. And that's, a version of what I hear you talking about is the glasses or the lens with which we see all of those things through can really dictate the next event for us, good or bad. And so when you were focused on failure, you kept failing. And when you decided to just enjoy golf, play golf, see how good I could be, you actually won. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, the term I use now a lot with golfers is the only way to gain control is to give up control. And that's true in golf and it's true in life. You can't control outcomes, but I can control my effort, my energy, my attitude, right? Like all these things that improve my performance and improve my quality of life. They go hand in hand. And if they both go one direction, good luck, right? So if I can take care of my life, my performance, I think is going to follow suit more often than not. And that's why, like you and I have talked, I think golf mirrors life so much. And that's why I've been able to overcome a lot of things in my life through my journey in golf because there's so many similarities and vice versa, right? I think they feed off each other. So focusing on one and figuring out a way out of one has always kind of lifted the other up and got me to where I am.
That's amazing, man. What a great correlation. And I agree. Golf it's a reflection of life. There's so much that I think we talked last time we were together about. The golf ball knows a lot about us. The golf ball knows what we're bringing to the course. The golf ball knows whether we've prepared or not. The golf ball knows, a lot about us. And you talked really openly about that.